One of the things that because of my longevity, I've had the pleasure to see is the evolution of what has happened with lighting. I mean, you talk about acts of light. Jean was probably lighting with Brigham, and if she had used saturated red for 22 minutes, it would have been pale pink by the end of the show. So we've moved from situations where you could not use saturated color for more than a couple of minutes because it would fry and there would be a hole in the middle of the gel, to now not only can you, but you have instruments that have enough foot candles coming out of them that you can actually do it and see what's going on stage. The other thing about Jean is she used to light with 500-watt Fresnels. That was her preferred instrument, even in side light, which I still have trouble comprehending. But I read something a while ago that said that she had the capacity to go on for hours on end talking about the warm, friendly, enveloping light from a Fresnel. That was her preference. Preferences have changed. You almost never see Fresnels in stage lighting anymore unless you're in a space that has a ceiling height of about 12 feet. And then everybody uses Fresnels. So, you know, the evolution has caused us to move to a point where I think, and I believe you all would agree with this, it's less about whether you're lighting a musical or lighting a drama or lighting a ballet. It's more about what is the nature of that particular musical, that particular ballet, or that particular dramatic piece of literature. You can have ballets that require almost no color. You have others that would die without really significant color choices being made in them. I recently had the occasion to light an evening of Tudor works, and there were 3 pieces that the Joffrey was doing, and each one required a totally different approach to color. Lilac Garden is not going to use the same kind of color choices or saturation levels that Offenbach and the Underworld will. One of them takes place in a Parisian cafe, and the other takes place under moonlight in a garden surrounded by lilac bushes. So they're both dance, but you can't say that there is a common use of color in dance. It has to be the choice that's appropriate to the event. And be glad that you're designing in an era where you have lighting instruments that have the punch to let you put a gel in that has a 5% transmission rate and really get away with it. Yeah.
This is a question, I guess, for everybody. One thing that I push to my peers and other students is to look at the histograms, the spectrum analysis that the gel uses, as well as the transmission percentages. To what degree do y'all employ those, and in what ways do y'all employ that data in the gel books in your design?
Okay, so for those of you that might not have heard, the question was how frequently do we rely on the graphs and the data that are in the gel books or possibly available from the manufacturers? My answer, I don't, because I trust my eyes more than I trust what's on a chart. But that's me. And I do believe that for somebody that's just beginning to figure this out, they're an excellent tool. But, you know, it's again, and this is, you know, you learn lessons in very indirect ways. My dad was going into a design meeting with a different lighting designer. It wasn't me. And he came to me before the meeting. He said, I really get frustrated whenever I meet with this guy. And I said, why is that? He said, because all he wants to talk is gel numbers. You know, I'll say I want a nice pale blue, and he'll say, oh, you want Roscoline number, and it was back when we were using Roscoline. And I said, no problem. I've got the solution. And I went to my briefcase, and I pulled out one of each gel book that he might possibly grab. And I said, when you go into the meeting, before the meeting starts, set the gel books in the middle of the table. And he came back afterwards, and he said it was great. All we did was talk about color. No number came up. Just the fact that that gel book was there and we could level the playing field, if he said a number, I could pick it up and look at what that number meant that we moved past the technical jargon and started talking about the design issues. So that's why I don't use those charts. I'm more interested in what that physical color is. But yes, I would agree when you're dealing with somebody that's just starting and just trying to figure out what those means, there's a very good clue right there. But trust your eyes.
I would agree with the trusting your eyes. I didn't have any formal education when I started theater. I learned on the job and in all of my experiences. But now that I know a little bit more, I look at, every now and then I'll look at the transmission if I'm not sure, because I really like that color, and depending on how many lights are in the system, would you agree that if it's only a 2% transmission and we only have 8 lights, chances are I might reconsider that choice. Even though I really love that color, it might not be the best choice for the situation. Or depending on what light, are you lighting it with PARs or are you lighting it with Fresnels? I mean, you do have to make some, and I think that's when the situation comes in where we would, look a little bit deeper into the thing, but definitely trusting your eyes.
And we've been in situations, and we've learned from situations where we look at, and even looking at a gel like this and go, oh, that might work, and then you get it on stage and realize that, and you've talked about holding it in front of a light to test it before you do.
Yeah, don't trust what this looks like, because
Right.
this is not
And
what it
there
looks
have
like
been
on stage.
situations where we've gone. I mean, it's been a while since this has happened, but we thought we had a good color, and we get there and we go, oh, there's a lot more green in that. And maybe had we looked at this chart, we would have known that there is more green in it than we thought. But now I think we look at those with our eyes now and go, oh, we can look at this and kind of predict what this chart is going to say. And I think we like that way better.
Yeah, and the other thing, too, is you have to be really careful, and this is not really a topic, it might come up later, but most of us get really used to a black floor or a dark floor with color, but when you have to go into that, usually it's high schools, we've done some really fabulous, that Beauty and the Beast show was a high school. You get these blonde floors, these like almond-colored floors, and the colors that you're so used to no longer look the same on those floors. And
this information goes out the window when you're working in the high school auditorium with the blonde wood floor.
so yeah, that's something that we're challenged by every time. We think we have our favorite colors, and no, we have a whole nother color palette for those.
Yeah, like these guys said, I mean, the graph reaffirms it for me. Like I've always been a touchy-feely designer, and that's how I work. I'm always the guy that likes to have my hand on the console. So
something that when you're using saturated colors, it is kind of a nice tip. Sometimes there's actually some greens in the swatch book that have more red than the red does on the spectral curves. It kind of tips you off that I may have an issue with this. Also, especially with the saturates, the paler colors, it's really not that much of an issue because there's a lot of other things going on. But the saturates is kind of a good idea. Well, you can look at it and you don't notice it, but you realize, oh my gosh, there's a lot of green in that. So that's gonna, if you don't have time to color test, that's